Overall, this is actually a really good interview, and there's not much for me to add. One concept I want to touch on that was not covered, though, is what is baseload and how the power grid is built. So, something like a nuclear reactor cannot change its power output quickly. And when I say quickly, I mean you might be able to raise it 100 megawatts or a couple hundred megawatts every hour, but that's about it. You cannot take a nuclear reactor that is completely turned off and be generating a gigawatt by the end of the day. If you try to do that, you'll blow the reactor up. It takes a long time to raise those. Now, once it's up at 700 megawatts, if you want to go to 800, you can do that probably within an hour safely. But you can't react super fast to big load changes. And this is where the term base load comes in, is there's a certain amount of power that the grid will just never need less than at any given point in time, and it does change over the course of the day. So like at night, the base load is very low, and then about 7 a.m., the load goes way up because everybody's waking up, they're turning stuff on, they're making breakfast, and then it dips a little bit during the middle of the day, and then at 5 p.m. when everyone gets home, turns their air conditioning on, it spikes to the highest point that it hits throughout the entire day. And so base load is kind of like, where can our slow changing assets like coal fired plants and nuclear plants and to a lesser degree oil furnace plants, things where the typical reactor or power generation is measured in like hundreds of megawatts or gigawatts, those are typically base load assets. And then you get, on top of that, you get intermediate power generation, which is usually something like a hydro dam or smaller coal fire plants, biomass plants, some of the sort of medium-sized natural gas facilities. And their purpose is, okay, we've got this base load that's taken care of, but then for the 7 a.m. and 5 p.m. spikes, we're going to need to make like twice as much power as exists in base load. So we turn on these intermediate load plants. They take maybe a couple hours to come online, but then they can generate significant power once they're up and running. But then you can also turn them off in another hour or two, so you're not wasting, fuel or whatever. And then the final layer is peaking power. And those are typically simple cycle gas, natural gas, oil fire plants, pumped hydro storage. Sometimes nowadays you're getting flywheel energy stores or grid scale batteries of some sort. These are peaking power is the grid needs X amount of megawatts or gigawatts right the hell now. How can I get this in the next 15 seconds? That's what peaking power is for. Some of the slower peaking power is measured in like minutes. So you can take a combined cycle plant from shutdown to full power in about 5 minutes, 15 minutes for some of the older models. That's peaking power, is I need power right now. How do I get it? And so the thing to understand about all the grid is that at every one of these power generating facilities, from baseload to peaking, there are these giant magnetic rotors that are actually generating the power, and every single one of them is locked in phase with each other. And part of turning the power plant on is synchronizing that motor with the rest of the grid, because that's where you get your 60 hertz waveform from and a bunch of other things about electricity. And so when you tie all these plants together and you have these big transmission lines, the transmission lines themselves have capacitance for a couple of seconds, and it is a very small battery in some real sense of the word. The other thing I really wanted to touch on was nuclear-powered cars. Those are probably never going to be a thing unless we make some quantum leap in shielding, because there's no way in something as small as a car to adequately shield against gamma radiation, and a running nuclear reactor produces way too much gamma radiation. There is not a way to shield that safely for a human. The other problem is cars crash. How do you make a core that isn't going to break apart and contaminate everything when it's running? Cars are probably never going to get nuclear reactors. And then the final thought is, I love nuclear, and I love talking about it. If you have any questions, by all means ask them. I would love nothing more than to answer them.
Did you say poppy seed size?
Yeah, they're poppy seed size. So
To get into the details of some of the fuel forms, there was a type of fuel that was developed decades ago and tested for a really long time. So it's been proven to be really robust. But you take a tiny piece of uranium and you coat it with ceramic. And that ceramic means that even in the worst case scenario, where your reactor somehow disintegrates, these little pellets are self-contained, so they can't even release any radioactive gas. So it's
Okay, so a little bit of radiation 101 to try and explain the ceramic shell concept and why it matters. You have four types of radiation: alpha, beta, gamma, and X ray. So, biologically speaking, alpha is the most damaging to you. I know gamma has the reputation of being super bad. We'll get to that. Um, Alpha radiation is two protons, two neutrons, and no electrons. Beta radiation is an electron. It can be a positron as well. And then gamma and X ray are both photons. Now, to give you a sense of scale, if I made a nucleus of helium, which is alpha particle, if I were to make that the size of a basketball, it would be 150 pounds. And let's say I fired it at you like it was a bullet out of a gun at 1,500 feet per second. That would obviously just vaporize. Like if I shot it at center mass of your chest, it would just vaporize the upper half of your body, and your legs would, just go flying into the next county. By comparison, an electron, so beta radiation, would be a marble that was about a quarter inch in diameter, which is about 6 millimeter, and it would hit you at 15,000 feet per second because they typically have higher energy than alpha particles, so they move faster. But the problem, or the difference, the reason that they are less biologically damaging is they have effectively zero mass. So I could tell you, like, imagine getting shot by a feather, but it's actually way less mass than even a feather. So, like, it would hit you, but you wouldn't notice because it doesn't have any mass to hit you with. The reason that beta radiation is damaging is because at an atomic level, it will like knock electrons off of molecules, and it will split nuclei apart, and it has other effects that make it damaging that are hard to explain at like a human scale. And then you have gamma and X-ray. Again, these are both photons, which are single points in space and time. So, like, even at this enhanced scale, they're a single point in space and time. The problem with gamma rays, they also have no charge and no mass. So much like the beta, they would pass right through you and you probably wouldn't even notice. The problem with them is the wound channel. As they pass through you, they're going to knock electrons off, they're going to disrupt various things, and the wound channel around where they pass is where you're going to get the cancers and cellular death and whatever else. The final thing I want to throw out there is if I were to make uranium-235 is typically what's used in reactors for fuel. There are other things, but we'll just pick one. So if I were to make, at the basketball scale, the nucleus of uranium-235 would be 7,000 times the diameter of the distance between the Earth and the Sun. So if I were to hold up a basketball and that be helium, uranium-235 would be a sphere, if you put the center of it where the sun is, the outside of the sphere would be many times beyond the orbit of Pluto. So the reason that the ceramic shell works is what it's doing is it's stopping molecule or atomic-sized particles from being able to leave because they're just too massive to fit through. And the beta and the gamma and the X-ray, those can all leave the ceramic shell. But the way to imagine that is you have this little pellet sitting on the ground and it's got lasers shooting out of it, and the laser beams are the beta and gamma radiation. As long as you're not near it, you can probably walk in between the laser beams and be completely fine. But where it's a problem is if the ceramic shell cracks, then all of a sudden you could potentially breathe in the fissile material, and then the laser beams would be shooting out in all directions from inside of you. And that's what makes it so damaging, and that's why you want to keep it in a ceramic shell, is you do not want that inside of you leaving. Oh, sorry. And one last point I wanted to make about gamma and X ray with the whole shooting thing. The reason that gamma gets the bad reputation that it does for being so dangerous is normally wherever there is gamma radiation, there is a lot of gamma radiation. And so the way that I explain it that kind of gets it through to people, this violates the scale principle.
But when you think about other countries that want nuclear and they say, hey, why can't we have nuclear energy? Why can't we have nuclear fuel?
I don't have access to classified information, so perhaps there's something that I don't understand. But at a physics level, there's no such thing as a peaceful power reactor that can't create weapons grade material. Every single light water reactor in the United States produces plutonium 239 in its core. And there's a process called Purex, that's Purex, which is specifically designed to chemically separate plutonium 239 from spent fuel. One of the reasons why the entire U.S. nuclear fleet is light water reactors, part of it is because of one particular admiral who wanted light water reactors for submarines. But the other reason is because you can make weapons material with every one of the reactors that we have for power. And when you have 90 reactors, you get enough to make several bombs a year if you reprocess all the spent fuel. So the question some people have asked and wonder is, where did this spent fuel problem come from? We didn't have it for the first 20, 30 years of having nuclear reactors. Why is it a problem now? And the reason why is because we stopped making new bombs. We stopped making new plutonium cores. Now, if you want to make a uranium bomb, then you just enrich the uranium, and instead of putting it in the reactor, you just use it in the weapon. So it matters what kind of bomb you want to make. There are reactor designs which have physical or chemical changes inside of them that make it more rare for plutonium to be created, or might have some sort of poison, like certain reactors create a lot of uranium 233, which is, to spare you a lot of reading, if you have plutonium 233, you can technically make a bomb from it, but literally everyone on Earth with a radiation detector will know that you are doing this, and there's no amount of shielding you can put in place to prevent that. Also, from the time you put the core into your weapon to the time it detonates has to be very short, because it will emit such strong radiation that will burn out all the electronics you use to detonate your bomb. So 233 is like a huge pain in the ass. But where I'm trying to go with all of this is there are designs that make it less likely, but the reason why Iran, for example, cannot be allowed to have peaceful nuclear power for themselves and is not allowed to have reactors that even other countries supply everything for is because the minute that Iran kicks your people out of the country, they can just rip all that stuff out of the core, turn it back into a normal one, assuming they have the technical know-how to do so, and then go and make plutonium with it. So whenever you read news articles and wonder why can these other countries not have peaceful nuclear power, that's why. It's because there's from a physics perspective, there's literally no such thing. If they want to build a bomb, they can, and every power reactor on the planet has that capability. This is physics, and unfortunately, the information for what to do and how to do it has been published for the better part of 40 years. You can't uninvent physics.